Hey folks, Chad Olds here again, and today I want to talk about how to maintain a strong work-life balance while taking on a much more demanding role, like a field sales role, if maybe you're in inside sales. This actually came from a conversation that I had. I had coffee with somebody for a mentoring session, somebody that I had kind of recently met that was asking for advice on maybe taking an outside sales role. And we sat down for coffee, and he launched into it pretty quickly. He said, Chad, I've got this opportunity to go into field sales. It's something I've always wanted to do, but I am terrified of what it could do to my work-life balance and what it could do with my relationship with my family. And it kind of immediately it just came out. I said to him, if your family life suffers because you took a field sales role, then it is your fault. It is absolutely your fault, because there's so many things that as sales reps we can take advantage of as people that work from home, that have these crazy schedules and have all this travel that we do. There's so many ways that you can take advantage of all the times in between to make sure that you keep your family life as strong as you're keeping your business or your territory. So how do you do that? The first thing I said to him is you've got to become a good remote employee. When not traveling, you need to make sure that you kind of establish that you can work from home. You're active on the collaboration tools that we have. You use video calling. You do all of those things that are kind of the basis for being a really good remote employee, and that you do that when you're working from home, especially when you're not traveling. Let's talk a little bit about the collaboration tool, whether you have Slack or Teams. There's a lot of people that if you're not at headquarters, if you're not in the office, that you probably won't interact with a lot. Sure, you'll interact with your management and maybe a couple of executives from some of the product teams or whatever it is because of your clients. But you're probably not going to be interacting with a lot of the engineering teams or development teams or these people that you will desperately need something from, maybe the services organization. You're probably not interacting with them very often. One way to do it is to go in the office all the time. The other way to do it is to use the collaboration tools that they're probably super active on in the first place. So make sure you use those. The other super important point is to use the video conferencing features that you probably have in your organization. Most people have Zoom now, or they have Teams, or they have something else where you can do video calling. And I'll tell you, for every organization I've run for probably the last 5 or 6 years, I have always turned on my video, whether it's with people that work for me, whether it's the peers that I have, or it's customers. And what I found is if I turn it on after 1 or 2 calls, they turn theirs on as well. Oftentimes they'll just flip theirs on because, especially if it's customers, they're probably in the office anyways for the types of people that I usually sell to. So they flip their video on and we can have a face-to-face conversation. It's great for the relationship, but it's just as strong for the relationships internally. Even with my bosses, I've found that I turn my video on all the time and we have our one-on-ones, they turn on their video. And then they realize how great it is to see the whites of somebody else's eyes. And they start sending out Zoom links instead of just conference call links for the team meetings. And it pretty quickly, it snowballs into a culture of video calling. So you don't have to be there all the time. So that's really important, because the things that people say about traveling, especially in outside sales, they are true. There's a lot of traveling. You do have to go see your customers. You do end of quarter, end of year, New Year's Eve, you're going to be putting in extra work. And that can be tougher on the family. But if you take advantage of the other things, if you make sure that when you're not traveling, you're working from home, if you're making sure that you're taking advantage of the time that you have while you're at home, that brings me into another part of the conversation, which is so important. In sales, you're going to work late hours sometimes. You're going to work weird days sometimes. You're going to go take a vacation and you're going to have to take a couple hours out to have that super important conversation with that procurement person that you need to speak with. But when you're at home and you have the opportunity to take your kid to school or go to lunch with them, or maybe go mow the lawn or take your spouse out on a date, you put 4:30 every second Tuesday on your calendar. You block it out, 4:30 on. And you make sure that you take your spouse to dinner, or, in the middle of the day, especially if I'm traveling a lot. I typically try to be an every other week traveler. I'll travel for 1 or 2 days at a time, every other week. But when I'm home, if I get the opportunity to just go do something in the middle of the day with one of my kids and I don't have a call scheduled, I absolutely do it. Because I know that if I do that, then when I need to go travel or I need to do something else, that I'm going to have that freedom without the guilt of thinking that I've stepped away from my kids for too long. The other thing that I'd say is when you're traveling, make sure you take absolute advantage of the time. We all say this. Your manager says it to you a billion times. Make sure that you stack lots of meetings while you're traveling. there's a big difference between being in the lobby, spending tons of time meeting with every single person that will take a meeting with you, no matter who they are, no matter if they're related to your project or not, they're related to your product that you sell or not. There's a big difference between that and stacking your days with good meetings, with strong meetings. When I travel now, it looks a lot different than it did before I had kids. Before I had kids, if I was going somewhere cool, like I was going to Seattle, I'd make sure I go up to Snoqualmie, Washington, because they have great restaurants and a beautiful waterfall and all this cool stuff. And I'd spend some time doing stuff around town, or maybe some of the cool nature sites that are close. Now, when I travel, I spend a lot of time and effort before I go, making sure that I'm meeting with strong people, with the people that I need to be meeting with while I'm there. And it's not a lot of fun anymore because I fly in, I start with my meetings. I have multiple meetings in a day. I have a dinner that night. I make sure the next morning, if I have time, I get another couple of meetings in, 1 or 2 meetings, and then I fly out and I come home. If you spend that extra time making sure that you plan your meetings correctly, then you spend a lot less time while you're out there sitting in lobbies. That's all I have today. That's all I really wanted to talk about for that. If you have any questions, please comment. If you think I'm wrong, I'd love to hear that too. I think in the micro sense, there's definitely times where as sales reps, we have to do some pretty crazy things from travel, on holidays, that kind of stuff. But I think at a macro level, if you manage it correctly, it's very doable. So comment, share, like, anything that you'd like to see me do. I'd love to hear your feedback. I've had some folks ask me a few things. One was, what's it really like to be a first line manager in sales? Another one was, hey, I've got this startup that I'm thinking about going to. How do I actually value their options? They want to give me 100,000 shares, and that sounds great, but what does that actually mean? So I've got a couple of podcast ideas that I'm thinking about doing, but I'd love to hear if you have any suggestions. It helps me out. It helps me know that these are valuable to you if I'm going to be doing them. And with that, good selling, and let's go crush it.